I am the wicked woman whom everyone in the capital seeks to kill. After slaying the imperial consort with my own hands, I became the new emperor's sole empress and was granted permission to return home to visit my family. As I looked at the relatives of the 9 clans kneeling before the imperial carriage, I saw no sign of my mother. My father was drenched in sweat, and my 4 older brothers stammered for a while before finally pointing to the beautiful young woman standing beside them and saying, "This is my mother." I smiled. Having grown up by my mother's side, how could I possibly not recognize her? So I immediately ordered my men to strip the woman of her clothes and jewelry, and then to chop off both her hands, the ones wearing my mother's favorite bracelets. He began to question her. "Where did my mother go? Who gave you the nerve to use her things?" Ancient story time, ancient channel. I hope you all enjoy my stories. Feel free to like and subscribe. On the day I returned home to visit my family, my father gathered the whole family at the front door, where they respectfully knelt and bowed their heads to me. I sat in the imperial carriage, watching the relatives of the 9 clans as they bowed deeply. They were all familiar faces, but my mother was the only one missing. I frowned. It had been 10 years since I entered the palace, and today was the first time I'd returned home. Why hadn't my mother come to greet me? I asked my father about it, but he pointed to the woman standing beside him and said, "This is my mother." But I didn't know that person at all. But the clothes and jewelry she was wearing were all my mother's. Even the agarwood perfume I'm wearing was specially commissioned by me and prepared for my mother. But now, all of these things are being used by a stranger. I was extremely displeased and was just about to speak up and confront him when my older brother spoke up first. "Your Majesty the Empress, Mother and Father knew you were coming back, and they were so overjoyed they couldn't sleep for days. Mother has been waiting for you every day. She's cleaned the house dozens of times and prepared your favorite foods well in advance. Now, at last, you're here." "She's not my mom." "Where's my mom?" I looked each of them in the eye and asked. My older brothers hesitated for a moment, but then pointed to the unfamiliar woman and said, "This is our mother." The woman crawled forward a few steps on her knees and smiled gently at me. "My daughter, Mother has finally waited for you to come home. You have no idea how much I miss you." As she spoke, a hint of longing and delight even flashed in her eyes. I let out a cold laugh and immediately ordered my men to strip her of the clothes and jewelry belonging to my mother that she was wearing. I grew up by my mother's side. I know her better than anyone. "Who do you think you are, daring to impersonate my mother? Who gave you the nerve to touch my mother's things?" Her face betrayed her embarrassment and humiliation as she shivered in the biting cold. For a moment, everyone shuddered 3 times, and even more people, trembling with fear, knelt even more upright and bowed their heads even lower. Only my father, fearless in the face of death, stepped forward to defend that woman. "Your Majesty, you haven't been home for 10 years, so you don't know how much things have changed. Now that our circumstances have improved, your mother lives a life of luxury and comfort, and her life has gotten better and better. That's why her appearance has changed. She's just become younger and more beautiful. How could you hurt your own mother?" "My own mother?" My expression turned cold. My patience had run out. "I've been away from home for 10 years. But do you really think I'm that stupid? How could I not recognize my own mother? How dare you try to fool me with an impostor?" Seeing that I was angry, my older brother quickly began to make a feeble defense. "Your Majesty the Empress, Father's co-wife is also your mother. How can you be so disrespectful to your elders?" "Co-wife?" I narrowed my eyes. When I entered the palace, my family was so poor that we couldn't even get enough to eat. Now that we're wealthy, my father has actually taken a concubine. But the gold, silver, and valuables I had sent back home were only meant to ensure my mother could live a comfortable life. I cast a casual glance at my father. Immediately, a guard stepped forward and pressed a knife to his neck. "The Empress commands you to reveal the whereabouts of the old lady." That woman couldn't even take care of herself, yet she was still putting on an act. "Your Majesty the Empress, please do not put your father in a difficult position, lest you damage the bond between you as father and daughter." I gave a cold laugh. The maid standing beside me immediately stepped forward and spoke sharply. "Did Her Majesty the Empress give you permission to speak?" Disrespecting one's superiors, a slap across the face. Furong had studied martial arts, so she struck with tremendous force. The woman's face quickly swelled and turned red, and blood began to seep from the corner of her mouth. I looked up and scanned the crowd kneeling on the ground, trembling with fear. Still not going to say anything? Facing my piercing gaze, my older brother finally bowed his head repeatedly toward me and spoke in a trembling voice. In response to Her Majesty the Empress's question, my mother angered my father by failing to fulfill her duties properly, and she has been locked in the cellar. A cellar? A murderous impulse suddenly welled up inside me. Who gave you the nerve? The cellar is always extremely cold in the summer, let alone now, when it's the dead of winter and snow is falling heavily. I suddenly hurled the portable heater I was holding at the crowd with all my might. It struck the woman's father right on the head, and blood gushed out instantly. The embers fell onto the snow, sizzling and smoking. A spark landed on the woman's skirt, instantly setting it ablaze. The woman, terrified, tried to put out the fire while shouting for help. In an instant, the crowd fell deathly silent. My second older brother crawled on his knees until he was in front of me. Your Majesty, it wasn't our intention to harm our mother on purpose. It's just that she's so despicable, so we wanted to teach her a lesson so she'd mend her ways in the future. Teach her a lesson? I waved my hand impatiently, and someone stepped forward and slapped him so hard he couldn't say a word. My mother, who are you to lecture her? After the woman finally managed to put out the fire, she spoke up, her face deathly pale, as if she had no regard for her own life. Her Majesty the Empress does not know the whole story. The truth is, my older sister is extremely spoiled and arrogant, and she has made life at home unbearable. Your father had no choice but to resort to this desperate measure. My guy just kicked her aside. Get lost. The imperial carriage headed toward the cellar. The cellar had long since frozen over, and the cold made people shiver. I never would have imagined that my father and brothers, living a life of luxury and abundance, would be so out of touch with reality that they were completely detached from the realities of everyday life. My mother, however, looked so old and haggard that she was barely recognizable. Despite the weather, she was wearing nothing but a single light garment. My older brothers were so brazen that they even put several mice in the cellar. Right now, these rats seemed to have taken my mother for food. Bite and gnaw at her. She was covered in blood and covered in wounds. My eyes were bloodshot. The long spikes of my gauntlets dug into the palms of my hands, and blood dripped onto the ground. I ordered my men to strip those people of their clothes and, as usual, throw them into the cellar. Several people were so terrified they collapsed to the ground, and the air was filled with screams and wails. Your Majesty, we only wanted to punish Mother a little. We had no idea she was wearing just a light gown. And as for these mice, we didn't put them there either. Having spent many years in the depths of the palace, I have witnessed countless instances of intrigue and the treacherous nature of human hearts. They thought they could fool me with that kind of nonsense. Anyone who harms my mother will surely face tenfold retribution. Ignoring the others, I hurriedly ordered someone to go immediately and summon the imperial physician traveling with us. He took his mother back to the warm, cozy house. Since I entered the palace, things at home have changed beyond recognition. The old mud brick house was torn down and has now been replaced by an extremely luxurious and magnificent home. Without a moment's hesitation, I chose the largest and most luxurious room for my mother to recover in. When my mother finally came to and realized where she was so terrified that she actually rolled right off the bed and onto the floor. She cried and struggled, refusing to stay there. She wanted to go back to her own place. Although I didn't understand why, I was afraid she might hurt herself, so I had no choice but to do as she wished. But who would have thought that my mother's so-called home was actually our family's abandoned pigsty? My mother's bedding and all her daily necessities were kept in the pigsty. You can tell at a glance that it shows signs of having been lived in for many years. I fought for my life against others in the palace, narrowly escaping death time and again, and finally became Empress, also that my mother could live a good life. Now it's all going to outsiders. I'm always doing all the work for others. I flew into a rage and ordered my men to bring those men before me for interrogation, one by one. I absolutely have to know how my mother has been getting by all these years while I've been away. That woman took everything from my mother. Yet she still twists the truth. She knelt on the ground and insisted. Your Imperial Majesty, my sister cannot get used to a life of luxury. She herself said that a life of poverty brings her greater peace of mind, and it was she who asked to live in the pigsty. She says this is a way to remember the hardships and appreciate the good life. My father said so, too. Your Majesty, we gave all the gifts you bestowed upon us to your mother. She was the one who turned them down. She said she wasn't used to such fine things and just wanted to continue living the simple life she was used to. The older brothers all chimed in as well. That's right. Mom has a strange personality and can't stand other people. She can't make a good life for herself. And she can't stand to see us living well either. Every day, she finds all sorts of reasons to pick on us, just to make our lives miserable. Not only that, but last time she also deliberately injured my father's concubine, which is why my father decided to give her a light punishment with a strong lesson. I never imagined she was so calculating, deliberately making herself look so pitiful just to make the Empress think she's not living well. She's deliberately framing us. I listened to their fabrications with a cold smile, then immediately ordered the guards to drag all these liars out and subject them to torture. It's a shame that these idiots, even as the rod came down on them, still couldn't resist pleading for mercy on behalf of that woman named Chen Baishuang. Your Majesty, you may punish us however you see fit, but I beg you, please don't hurt Mother anymore. Mom has always been frail. You can't treat her like this, or else we won't consider you our sister anymore. You disobedient daughter. How dare you strike your father? You've flouted both moral and legal principles. Even as Empress, you'll be reviled by the people. Order these men to stop immediately, and I'll forgive you. A bunch of idiots are spouting threats outside the door, clearly having forgotten that for all these years they've been relying on my generosity. Everything they have now is thanks to me. When I first entered the palace, they made me a promise. My daughter, since you've sacrificed yourself for the sake of our family, I will certainly remember your request and take good care of your mother. Little sister, since you're in the Imperial Palace, it's our responsibility to take care of Mother. We'll definitely make sure she has a good life. In their letters, they used to tell me how well and happily my mother was doing, but it turns out they were all lying to me, just so I could ensure their entire family would live in wealth and prosperity. With that thought, I stared coldly at Chen Baishuang, who had already been beaten until he was vomiting blood. She couldn't take the beating anymore, so she finally started crying and begging for forgiveness. Your Majesty, I'll tell you the truth, I'll tell you everything. Please spare my life. I was feeding my mother the medicine that the court physician had prepared. Meanwhile, I had the maid search high and low for the 1,000-year-old ginseng root I'd sent to my mother a few days earlier. But even after searching the entire house, they found nothing. Chen Baishuang, kneeling on the ground, was too guilty to look up. I glanced at her, and she immediately shuddered. Your Imperial Majesty, I know I was wrong. It's all my fault. I didn't take good care of the lady. I should have talked to her more and encouraged her to take better care of herself. I shouldn't have just given up and stood by idly while she tormented herself like this after trying to talk to her a few times and seeing that it wasn't working. I am willing to serve the lady as a slave or maid to atone for the mistakes I have made. Watching her put on an act, I couldn't help but sneer. Do you even think you're worthy of serving as a maid to this princess's mother? I left home when I was 6 and entered the Imperial Palace. That year there was a famine, and my father and brothers were all going to sell me to get silver to buy rice. But my mother wouldn't have it. She's always looked out for me. They've eaten all the grass and tree bark. When I was starving, my mother cut her wrist with a dagger and let me drink her blood. Back then, the thing she said to me most often was, "My daughter, you must stay alive. Only by staying alive can you have hope. As long as you're alive, things will always get better. If you die, everything is lost." It just so happened that people from the palace were there to select maids. Watching the people around me die one after another, my mother had no choice but to hold me in her arms and cry all night long. But the next day she steeled her heart and sent me to the palace. I know she was trying to find a better path for me. When I left with my nanny, my mother's grief and tears have caused me to wake up in the middle of the night countless times. It was my mother's presence that sustained me through 16 years of political intrigue in the palace. No matter how many times I've faced life and death crises, I've always persevered. I have to survive, I have to make it home alive to see my mother. Qin Baishuang heard me mention my mother. She saw the rare tenderness in my eyes and the longing for my mother in my voice. She couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, and a look of deep regret and fear flashed across her eyes. My bodyguard returned, bringing several people with him. With so many neighbors around, someone is bound to tell the truth if offered enough money. That's when I realized what kind of life my mother had been living all these years. Qin Baishuang is the nominal matriarch of this household. As for my mother, she was the servant for the whole family. Qin Baishuang made my mother kneel down and wash her feet. Every day, all year round, I washed her clothes and cooked her meals. Whenever she was in a bad mood, she would hit and yell at my mother. As the truth gradually came to light, Qin Baishuang shook like a leaf and collapsed to the ground. She crawled on her knees toward me, bowing her head repeatedly. Your Majesty, I was momentarily blinded by passion. I shouldn't have hurt the lady. Please give me another chance. I will do my best to make amends for the mistake I've made. I realize now that I was wrong, but unfortunately, it's too late. I looked at her coldly and spoke slowly and deliberately. Sure. A hint of secret delight flashed across Qin Baishuang's eyes, and she quickly spoke up. Thank you, Your Majesty the Empress. Thank you. But the moment she opened her mouth, I ordered my men to slash her face. A piercing scream rang out. Then you'd better start by repaying me tenfold for the pain my mother suffered. I stared at her hideously ugly face and smiled cruelly. Because my father refused to divorce my mother, you deliberately scarred her face when you had the chance, so that my father would grow to despise her completely, making her hideously ugly, which is why my father eventually elevated you to the status of a co-wife. I hear that this face is what you cherish most. You apply a pearl mask every day and even have my mother grind the pearl powder to a fine consistency for you. Since you care so much about this face, let's ruin it first. She looked at me in terror, tears and blood streaming down her face. Yet it is still fighting for its life. Your Majesty, it wasn't me who asked my sister to do these things. It was your father who told her to attend to me. She was just obeying him. Shut up. I yanked her hair hard and slammed her against the wall. She collapsed to the floor like a pile of mud. My father and older brother, who were outside, heard the commotion and actually tried to burst right in. You ungrateful daughter. What have you done to your mother? If you've got the guts, take it out on us, don't take it out on Mom. You have mistreated your mother and shown disrespect to your elders. I will file a petition with the Emperor to have you deposed as Empress. You want the Emperor to depose me? I let out a scoff. As of now, I'm afraid my father and brothers still haven't figured out what's going on. I turned to look at my mother, who was lying on the bed, barely clinging to life. Her chapped lips moved slightly, as if she were saying something. I leaned in to listen closely, and only then could I make out that she was muttering to herself. Zhao Zhao, you can't hurt my daughter. I'm going to protect my Zhao Zhao. My heart ached, and my eyes stung. My mother said you mustn't hurt me, but when you hurt her, you're hurting me too. I'm in just as much pain now as my mother was, so I'm going to make sure you suffer even more. Qin Baishuang was trembling all over from the intensity of my gaze, yet she still put on a brave face. It's because my sister was so thoughtless. Not only did she disregard her husband's future and fail to consider the children, but she also never accepted me. Which is why your father. Is that how you treat my mother? I interrupted her and slowly moved closer. Do you know why my mom isn't in good health? Before she could answer, I went on without waiting for her response. My father was a penniless scholar who couldn't stand the slightest hardship and knew nothing but the classics. Yet, despite taking the imperial examinations time and again, he never passed. It was my mother who rose early and stayed up late, tending to the crops in the fields by herself during the day and weaving cloth by lamplight at night. Whenever she went to the market to sell the cloth, it was with the silver she earned that she bought my father's expensive brushes, ink, paper, and inkstones. My older brothers were mischievous and had big appetites from a young age. To satisfy their cravings, My mother would go into the mountains alone in the dead of winter to catch wild rabbits. She once nearly fell off a cliff and died because of it. Since our family was struggling, she would often go without food herself, saving every bit of grain she could for my brothers. Father once promised Mother that once he passed the provincial examination, he would never let her down for the rest of his life. And my older brothers all vowed that when they grew up, they would certainly be dutiful sons to our mother. And what happened in the end? I chopped off both her hands with a single swing of my blade. As I listened to her heart-wrenching screams and watched her roll around on the floor, I felt the rage inside me burning ever more fiercely. My father gave you my mother's favorite bracelet, letting you enjoy the wealth and luxury that should have been my mother's, and even made her serve you as a slave, subjecting her to all kinds of humiliation. I aimed the blood-stained tip of my knife at Chen Baishuang, who was writhing on the ground. So, how should I punish you? Tears mixed with blood streamed down Chen Baishuang's face as she crawled on her knees, begging for mercy. Your Majesty, please spare my life. It was all your father's idea. I had nothing to do with it. He abused his power to force me to marry him. I'll file for divorce right now, and I'll leave immediately. It's too late. I kicked Chen Baishuang's hands away, thinking about where to strike next. My father and brothers, who were kneeling outside the door, had completely lost their minds. They disregarded the proper etiquette between superiors and inferiors and hurled insults at me. Zhao Zhaohua, you ungrateful daughter, you've hurt your own mother. May you die a horrible death. Zhao Zhaohua, you really are just as vicious as your mother. If I'd known, I should have killed both of you back then. Zhao Zhaohua, you'd better have the imperial physician treat my mother right away. If anything happens to her, we won't let you off the hook. These idiots still can't see the big picture, even at this late stage. Do they really think I'm just going to let them off the hook? After all, they're the ones truly to blame for the state my mother is in now. My bodyguards cracked their whips a few times, and blood immediately began to flow from several of them. The barking of the dog outside soon stopped. I stared coldly at Chen Baishuang, who was lying on the ground. You're afraid my mother will threaten your position, so you've been trying every trick in the book to get rid of her, making her wear thin clothes and live in an open-air pigsty, locking her in a cellar to be devoured alive by rats. Since you're so vicious, I'll return the favor in kind. I'll let you be devoured alive by wild dogs. Chen Baishuang was as white as a sheet of paper, and her dress was gradually getting wet in patches. A strange odor began to spread throughout the room. You should suffer just as much as my mother did. The sound of bones snapping filled the air, and Chen Baishuang let out another blood-curdling scream. Those who commit many wrongs will inevitably bring about their own downfall. You brought this on yourself. With a cold, cruel expression, I watched as half of Chen Baishuang's face was literally bitten off. The excruciating pain and fear caused her to pass out immediately. Suddenly, the Empress Dowager's voice rang out from outside the door. Empress, by showing disrespect to your elders and murdering them, are you not treating the laws of the Great Ming as nothing? How can you, acting this way, be the mother of the nation and a role model for the people? The Empress Dowager shouted sharply. My dear father knew that the Empress Dowager was burning incense at a nearby temple today. That is why he specifically sent someone to invite the Empress Dowager to come. I stood up and bowed to the Empress Dowager. Does Her Majesty the Empress Dowager know how much inhumane treatment my mother has endured? I must seek justice for the suffering she has endured all these years. Otherwise, I would not be worthy of being her daughter. I pointed at my mother, who was lying in bed, my voice cold and sharp. I will not let today's events go unpunished. Whoever dares to harm my mother will surely pay with their blood. But my father spoke with indignation. Baishuang is gentle and kind. She treated that vile woman exceptionally well. Yet the woman could not stand Baishuang in the slightest. This time, knowing that the Empress was returning to visit her family, she schemed relentlessly to frame Baishuang, even going so far as to use herself as bait. How utterly malicious is that vile woman's intent? No sooner had he finished speaking than several of his older brothers chimed in. That's right. Mother is a cruel and harsh woman who can't even tolerate us. She hinders our efforts and stands in the way of our future. She couldn't handle a life of luxury herself. And she didn't want us to live that way either. Little sister, you don't know, I originally wanted to go into business. But mother stopped me from doing so. She even said I wasn't cut out for business at all, and she wouldn't let me make friends. Whenever my friends came to visit, she'd chase them away. She just wanted me to be all alone, with no one to help me. That's right. One of my classmates, out of consideration for our long-standing friendship, sent me a gift for the Dragon Boat Festival, but my mother insisted on returning it. As a result, my reputation for being difficult to get along with has spread throughout the entire academy, and now no one is willing to associate with me anymore. These family members, whom their mother had cared for with all her heart and soul, giving everything she had, are now joining forces with a stranger to slander her. They harbor countless grievances against her. With the Empress Dowager backing them at this moment, they had even less to fear. My father led the way and knelt before the Empress Dowager. The great Ming dynasty governs the realm through filial piety, yet Zhao Zhaohua is so unfilial. If her daughter is so arrogant, how much better could her mother possibly be? Even if we truly did something wrong, our actions toward her mother were all out of necessity. I implore Her Imperial Majesty the Empress Dowager to see this clearly. Zhao Zhaohua is, at heart, just like her mother, sharp-tongued, spiteful, and self-serving, never giving a thought to others. She has returned home to visit her family only once after such a long time. Yet she has harmed her own flesh and blood and thrown the household into chaos. I beg you to report this to His Majesty, so that he may depose Zhao Zhaohua from her position as Empress and banish her to the Cold Palace. As she listened, the Empress Dowager's expression grew increasingly somber, and the look on her face became more and more displeased. Empress, since even your father and brothers do not approve of you, it is clear that your character is indeed lacking. Given your conduct, you are truly unworthy of this position and unfit to be the Empress of our great Ming dynasty. I shall immediately draft an edict to depose you. Looking at these ungrateful wretches who twist the truth and have lost all sense of morality, I feel nothing but endless anger and a chill in my heart. I've been in the palace for many years, and they've been living the good life thanks to my influence. Now, for the sake of some worthless woman, not only is she trying to kill my mother, but she's actually trying to drag me down into the mud. I clenched the long piece of armor tightly in my fist and glared coldly at the Empress Dowager, who was unaware of the truth, and at those few petty individuals who couldn't help but look smug upon hearing this. He laughed in frustration. Your Imperial Majesty, I have evidence of a crime to present. Please allow me to show it to you first. The Empress Dowager reviewed all the evidence. His expression was icy, and in a fit of rage, he smashed the teacup he was holding. Everyone in the room immediately dropped to their knees. Faced with the Empress Dowager's murderous glare, my father and several of my older brothers looked both frightened and bewildered. They've probably forgotten. Their mother had repeatedly advised them that, as members of the imperial family, they must keep a low profile. A tall tree attracts the wind. But they were blinded by wealth and glory. How could they possibly tolerate their mother stopping them? In the face of power and wealth, they are capable of harming even their closest relatives. My father, along with other officials, bought and sold official titles and accepted bribes. The older brother charged at a man on horseback and killed the spoiled rich kid right there on the street. My second older brother not only seized the common people's fertile farmland, but also killed them to silence them. Third brother was a regular at various shops, but he never paid for anything he bought. If a shop owner dared to come to his door to demand payment, he would simply break the person's legs. The fourth brother forcibly abducted women from the common people. He even went so far as to seize the wives of low-ranking officials. Every single thing that happens is because I, the Empress, am here. Everyone is scrambling to curry favor with them. The door was worn down by the constant stream of gift-bearers. My mother, however, always maintained a simple, unassuming demeanor. She worried about me, but she was even more concerned about my older brothers, who were constantly getting into trouble and had no sense of the consequences of their actions. She refused to let the gift-bearers into the house, forbade her brothers from associating with wastrels, and absolutely would not allow them to take people's lives or steal their money. Yet all of this has made my mother a thorn in the side of the entire family. Everyone felt that their mother was standing in their way and harbored a great deal of resentment toward her. Everyone wants their mother to die. My father used the gold and silver I had ordered to be brought home to take several concubines for himself right away. Each one was young and beautiful, and every one of them tormented their mother in an effort to curry their father's favor. In the end, these concubines schemed against one another in their quest for the emperor's favor, and by the end, only Qin Baishuang remained. She didn't want to be a concubine. She wanted to be the primary wife. She went so far as to torment her mother by any means necessary, and then persuaded her father to make her a secondary wife, until she had taken everything from her mother. For many years, while I was confined in the depths of the palace, every letter I received from my mother assuring me of her safety was a forgery. My father and brothers would never have allowed my mother to tell me the truth, for fear of ruining their plans. Just to be on the safe side, they even cruelly snapped their mother's fingers one by one. In just a few short hours, my secret guards had already uncovered everything. The Empress Dowager came from a distinguished family. She lost her mother at a young age due to a dispute between her mother and the concubines, and although she was the legitimate daughter, she was repeatedly subjected to abuse by the concubines and nearly died. She managed to survive against all odds in the inner quarters, which were controlled by the concubines. Therefore, he particularly detested the practice of favoring a concubine at the expense of one's wife. Now that he's been tricked again by his father and the others, his anger is easy to imagine. In the blink of an eye, however, the Empress Dowager ordered her men to flog my father, my older brother, and the others, each receiving 100 lashes. Before my father could put up any further resistance, the guards attending the Empress Dowager knocked out all his teeth. His mouth was full of blood, and he couldn't utter a single word. My 4 older brothers were as white as a sheet, pointing at me as they trembled. "Zhao Zhaohua, you're framing us." The air of arrogance they usually exuded, that arrogance born of relying on others' power, and the air of refinement cultivated by years of a life of luxury, have now vanished without a trace. One by one, they crawled on their knees across the floor, looking just like spineless dogs. I walked up to them, clutching a blood-stained dagger, and naturally, someone stepped on the backs of a few of them to force them to kneel more upright. The sound of bones being crushed came from where I had casually walked by. Slander? I let out a cold laugh and pointed the tip of the knife downward. The sound of the knife piercing the flesh was pleasant to the ear. Dozens of fingers snapped one after another right in front of me. To keep me from discovering the truth about your wicked deeds, fearing that mother might send me a message, you broke her hand just to be on the safe side, so she could never hold a pen again. The crimes you've committed are plain for all to see. Sooner or later, the truth will come to light. There's no need for others to slander me any further. If I cannot avenge my mother today, I might as well give up being Empress. The fingers are connected to the heart, and the pain of losing a finger caused several people to scream in agony. But the very next second, he didn't even dare to make a sound. Fearing they might disturb the Empress Dowager, the guard swords flashed. Several of them ended up with shaved heads. Those 4 pieces of trash kneeling on the ground finally got scared. They scrambled and crawled toward me, trying to get closer. His eyes were filled with panic, and he begged for mercy desperately. Beg me to spare them. My father kept bowing to me, desperately trying to make excuses for himself. I was deceived by that bitch Qin Baishuang. She's the one who incited me to do this. It was all her doing. She deliberately tried to ruin my relationship with your mother, and that's why she tricked me. A few of the older brothers also hit their foreheads until they bled. We were wrong. I truly realize my mistake. I beg Her Majesty the Empress to show mercy and spare us for my mother's sake. They still have the nerve to bring up their mother. Tired of listening to their barking, I slashed at them with my dagger. He chopped off half of their feet. While my mother was locked in the cellar, my father was afraid she would escape. I talked it over with my older brothers. He severed his mother's Achilles tendons, so she couldn't go anywhere. Now it's time for them to get a taste of their own medicine. Several people let out loud, agonized screams as they rolled around among the shards of broken porcelain, covered in blood. Since you know you were wrong, You'll have to pay the price. As I stared at their disheveled and pitiful appearance, a chill ran even deeper through my heart. Why didn't you realize you were in the wrong when you were tormenting Mom? Why didn't you admit your mistake when you were trying to kill her? And why didn't you realize you were in the wrong when you were teaming up with that slut to abuse Mom? I raised my hand slightly, my voice cold and cruel. Take them away and lock them back up in the cellar. Put another 100 mice in there. The guard stepped forward at the command and dragged the men away like dead dogs. They cried out and struggled, and the entire journey was filled with piercing screams, until the cellar door was closed again. As I listened to the commotion outside gradually die down, I turned my head coldly to look at Chen Baishuang, who lay unconscious on the ground. That bitch is using my mother's things and enjoying everything my mother has. They used underhanded tactics to frame my mother. There's no way I'd let her off that easily. I just grabbed my knife and chopped off her limbs. Blood gushed out. Only half of the people on Earth remain. Chen Baishuang woke up with a start, screaming at the top of her lungs. Tears mixed with blood, a hideous sight. You liked having my mother kneel and serve you, didn't you? Well, you'll never be able to stand up straight for the rest of your life. As I looked down at her pitiful state, I finally felt much calmer. Mother, I've avenged you. After a while, the officials from the county office finally arrived. A few people, covered in rat bites and pale from the cold, were dragged out of the cellar and brought before me. As soon as they entered the room, they saw Chen Baishuang's severed limbs, and the group collapsed to their knees. His expression was filled with shock and fear. My father struggled to crawl toward me. He was covered in blood. Daughter, please, save me. I know I was wrong, I really do. I'm your father. You can't treat me like this. I paid him no mind. I just listened as the imperial physician reported that my mother had a persistent high fever and was in critical condition. I kicked my father aside without mercy and addressed the county magistrate. His voice was as cold as ice. Conduct a thorough investigation into the crimes committed by Zhao Xuanchuan and his associates. Anyone implicated in these crimes shall be dealt with in accordance with the laws of the Great Ming. As for these men, to appease public outrage and provide the people with closure, they are to be sent to the celestial prison and beheaded in public at noon tomorrow. Upon hearing this, my older brother froze, then suddenly tried to lunge at me like a madman, but he was held down firmly. Little sister, we're family. How could you treat us like this? A family? I let out a cold laugh and smashed the teacup over his head. To keep my entire family alive, I sold myself for 10 taels of silver to enter the palace. To give my mother a better life, I had someone smuggle my entire monthly allowance out of the palace. What have any of you done? I saved your lives. Yet you show no gratitude. Instead, you've sought to harm me for your own selfish gain. My mother has poured her heart and soul into caring for you, and this is how you've treated her? The second brother wept uncontrollably, kneeling on the ground and repeatedly bowing his head. Little sister, it's all our fault. We were momentarily blinded by foolishness. It was father who told us to do this, it was him. Please, have mercy on us. A moment of foolishness? My gaze turned icy, and I slapped him hard across the face. When you abused mother for decades, was that just a moment of foolishness? And when you tried to kill her, was that also just a moment of foolishness? Since I was so foolish for a moment, why didn't I just die? I glanced at the guard standing beside me, and he immediately drew his sword and stepped forward. A flash of cold light, and several piercing screams simultaneously rent the air. Several tongues rolled onto the ground, and a few people fell to the ground, rolling back and forth. Fresh blood gushed from his mouth, quickly staining the ground red. They trembled as they bent down to pick up their tongues, their eyes filled with despair. It's finally quiet now. Drag him away. I stood up and turned away from them, my voice as cold as ice. The imperial physicians from the Imperial Medical Academy rode at full gallop from the capital. They brought all the rare medicines from the imperial palace. Dozens of imperial physicians stood watch at my mother's bedside. After examining her and discussing the case, they finally determined the best prescription. Your Majesty, as long as the old lady is given her medicine on time every day, she will be back to her old self in half a month at most. The deputy director of the Imperial Medical Academy bowed to me and then took his leave. I kept vigil at my mother's bedside. Talk to her slowly. Tell her I've been doing well these past few years. Tell her I miss her very much. I want to eat the osmanthus cake she makes 3 times a day. I helped my mother take her medicine. Finally, I saw her expression gradually brighten. It wasn't until half a month later that I lay exhausted on my mother's bed. But suddenly, I felt a warm hand brush against my face. When I woke up, I saw my mother's tear-filled eyes. Zhao Zhao, my daughter. My eyes stung, and I couldn't hold back any longer. I threw my arms around my mother. Mom, I miss you so much. I held her tightly and burst into tears. Mom, I'll take good care of you from now on. I'll never let you suffer any more hardships. Mother nodded happily. Her gaze toward me was filled with tenderness, longing, and guilt. I held my mother's hand and acted like a little kid, just like when I was little. Mom, you have to stay with me forever. I want to see you every day. Once my mother had recovered, I took her back to the capital. I interceded on her behalf, and the emperor conferred upon her the title of first-rank lady of the imperial court. My mother loves to cook, and it has been her dream for a long time to open a restaurant. I bought her a shop and asked the emperor to inscribe a plaque for it in his own handwriting. My mother started a business. She's busy every day, but she's very happy. The emperor also granted her special permission to enter the palace every day. As for those relatives of the Zhao family, those who had once been aligned with Zhao Xuanchuan and his son were later implicated. They had seized the people's fields and possessions, but everything was returned to them. Some people were also imprisoned and sent to the frontier to perform hard labor. It took me 16 years, but I finally became someone my mother could rely on. From now on, I'm going to make her the most carefree person in the world. Seeing my mother grow happier day by day, her face looking even younger than before, my heart is filled with peace and serenity. From now on, every day of our lives will be peaceful and serene.